everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to thrive instead of just surviving. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Good morning.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today on this wonderful Friday.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much for spending part of your Friday with us. And if you find this episode interesting, please do share it with a friend and see what they think about it.
This week we are talking about leadership, and since it's Friday, our CSC of the day is being complete. Complete has three components. There's being your whole self, so using your whole self in any given situation. You're not a fragmented person where you're different depending on who you're with or where you're at. You're the same person all the time, and you're using that whole self in everything that you're doing. The second part is to be fully present in the here and now, so you're not stuck in the past or the future on the worry-regret spectrum. And the third part... What's the third part? Oh, okay. And the third part is to fully engage with what is actually happening. So you're not like living in an alternate reality, which I think a lot of us do, even just small little alternate realities that are based on misconception about someone or something that happened.
Doesn't take much to get us off in fantasy land.
Right. Or living in denial. We want to be handling what's actually happening with the world. Mm-hmm. So today we thought we'd talk about letting go of mistakes.
Yeah, I think that can be a major barrier to fully engaging in our leadership, is if we're kind of paralyzed by this fear of making a mistake in the future,
right?
Maybe, or when we do make a mistake, and it is when, because it will happen, if we're like, well, I guess leadership's not just for me. I'm done now, and you try to quit.
Yeah, I feel like that happens way more often than we think it does, where somebody makes a mistake, we make a mistake, and then we're like, well, that just proves that I shouldn't be doing whatever it was that I was doing. And maybe it does.
Well, it kind of depends, I guess, doesn't
right,
it?
It does. Because, there are some things where it's like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, so learn from it and move on. But that might not mean that you are, in the wrong place. I was just this week in my Bible study, Beth Moore was talking about William Carey and how when he went over to India, he went as an evangelist, and he was thinking that what God was calling him to do was to preach and to kind of be that upfront leader like we were talking about. But then when he got over there, he found that what he was really passionate about and good at was translating and helping, change laws. Lobbying for change in laws.
Sure.
So
that's kind of behind the scenes stuff.
Right. It's not upfront. And so he ended up partnering with people who were good at the upfront stuff. Well, he was able to do he translated the Bible into like 6 different Indian dialects, which is just amazing.
It's brilliant. Yeah. And getting
so
into
necessary.
Getting into the right swim lane and doing your job.
Right. So, there's this balance between we have to look at our mistakes and say, okay, why did this happen? How do I need to grow? What does this show me about myself? And then ask ourselves, is it because I was doing something that was the wrong thing to be doing at the time? Or is it because I was in the wrong kind of job? What were the factors in this mistake?
Yeah, do some investigating. Ask some questions. I think we see a really good example of that in Mark 9. It's the story, we touched on it a little bit last week too, where Jesus is, where is he? He's off praying, or where is he? Because the disciples are trying to do something.
He's up on the mountain.
Is that the Transfiguration?
Yes.
Yeah, so anyway, most of the disciples are down in the village, and there's a boy who has a demon, and the disciples can't cast it out, and the people in the village are upset, and the disciples are upset, and Jesus finally comes back, and he has this amazing conversation with the father of the child. But at the end of the story is what I wanted to focus on today, where, Jesus ends up casting out the demon, and he has a little teaching moment there for everyone. But then as they're walking away, it's just Jesus and the disciples. And then they are like, why couldn't we do that? So instead of them saying, well, I guess casting out demons just isn't really my thing. I guess that's Jesus's thing, and my job must be complaining or something, because that's what I'm good at. They're engaging with the problem. They're not letting a mistake stop them. They're like doing that investigating. You just talk about, all right, Jesus, why didn't it work for me? And why couldn't it? They're asking the question. They're engaging with their leader.
Right.
They're going to the source. And, there's a lot of information in Acts and in the epistles. Some of these apostles they all, I think, became church leaders. Some of them we just know some information through church tradition and stuff. But we get to see them here before that, where they're just like, it's not working. I don't know why, and I don't know what I did wrong.
Right.
But they're doing what they need to do to figure it out.
Right. Well, we can't let past mistakes keep us from moving forward, or fear of failure. One of the things that we are both working on in our lives right now is making imperfect action, because imperfect action is what moves you forward.
Yeah, because no action is going to be perfect.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to kind of wrap your brain around that. Even, like you were saying, even the disciples weren't perfect. I was thinking about in 1 Corinthians 2, Paul talks about that. He says, "When I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on men's wisdom, but on God's power." And I think that's just a little bit of the underlying reasons there, as well as this great picture of Paul. If he's coming there and he's trembling while he's talking, and his message isn't with wise and persuasive words, but it's so that their faith doesn't rest on him. And I think that that's so key. As leaders, we don't want to create a personality cult.
No way.
We don't want people to follow us, because it's exhausting, first of all. But it's also not good for them. Mm-hmm. So we want people to follow what God says. And we always want to be directing people back to, here's where you find this in the Bible, and here's why this is what I think, and encouraging them to keep questioning and keep growing. Yeah. Even apart from us.
It's such an amazing transformation, just kind of using our imagination to think about Paul. I mean, if anybody could start a personality code, it probably would have been him, because he was the Pharisees' Pharisee. Like, he was the ultimate kind of legalist, power, like, I'm going to boss everybody around and persecute Christians guy. And then he has this amazing experience where on the road to Damascus, and then instead of just jumping right into, okay, I'm going to do Christian ministry now, like, he goes away, he disappears for 3 years, and he's getting training, and he's learning, he's submitting himself. So he comes out of the experience, and then he's able to write something like that, where he's just, and I think probably for the rest of his life, he would have to consciously use God's strength to be an effective leader, and not his own, which he could maybe muster up some pretty powerful, persuasive kind of energy, and like overpowering maybe logic or just whatever. But he's like, that's not how I work anymore.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So we want to take imperfect action, because that's what pulls us forward, because we're never going to be in a place where we can just take one perfect action after the other. I mean, yeah, we'll just get stuck in this analysis paralysis if we're trying to make sure that it's perfect before we do it.
Well, and if we are trying to make sure it's perfect, we're going to be operating under our own power anyway. We're not going to be submitted to God, because we're going to be kind of micromanaging. Like, okay, perfect is this. It's my definition of what's perfect. And so if I do that, I'm not surrendered, and I'm not following my leader.
So how do you think you let go of regrets and mistakes?
I think a really important way to do that is to realize that I'm not anywhere where I'm a leader, like in our family. You and I are leading our family. At church, there's never I think a way to solve that problem of letting go of regrets and to not have as many regrets is to realize you're part of a team always. I mean, Jesus is the only head of the church. So we're never like you're saying, that cult of personality situation where it's like, it's me kind of running the show. So, but in a group of leaders and where we're all kind of co-shepherds and following Jesus, our true shepherd, if there is a regret, we can, of course, confess it to God, and try to see whether it's sin or not.
Right.
But then talk about it with the group too and get some other perspectives on it. And if it was a genuine, a real goof up and a real problem, confessing and going through the steps that we need to do to find a resolution and to get reconciliation happening.
Right.
Or they might say, you're being too hard on yourself. And that's good too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that process of being able to just let go of things to, we're just as called to love ourselves as we're called to love other people. And part of loving ourselves is forgiving ourselves and saying, yep, you made a mistake, but God says he works everything out for the good of those who love him. So, confessing it to the Lord and asking him to redeem it into something beautiful, regardless of how big or small the mistake is, that's something that he can do. And then not letting regret keep you from moving forward.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a huge one because regret kind of turns into a snowball in a lot of ways. Like, we get stuck in regret and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because the longer we don't deal with it and the longer we stay stuck, the more of an issue it is.
Yeah, I think, we can't get hung up on our regrets. Like we want to acknowledge them and try to see, whether this is something worth, regretting or not. Or not even that. But at the same time, realize that we have this higher calling where we can't get stuck. We've got to keep moving. And I think you could abuse both of those either way. You could obsess over the regret and not move at all. And you could just plow over things that maybe you ought to kind of consider and regret and confess. So you want to be really aware of that. Right.
Well, and there's a difference between regret and repentance.
Yeah, that's right.
We want to do repentance where we really just say, okay, here's where the problem is. Lord, fix it.
Yeah, we just don't want to see every little hiccup as, oh, that's probably just something to regret when it actually is a sin or something. We need to investigate and do our due diligence to try to be honest about what's going on.
Yeah. As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for the good things in your life or to look for the not so good things in your life. We love you guys and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this episode helpful, please do share it. And come back next week and we are going to talk about ministry.
Because we're all ministers to the gospel.
Exactly. Yeah, so have a great weekend, you guys.
See you later.